The Globalist Takeover. Let's get dialed in. This is Texas Talkin, where we take on the issues that really matter. Like, for instance, the slow motion corporate, bureaucratic, and ideological takeover of, well, the entire planet. No big deal, right? Just your basic, everyday globalist coup d'etat. Nothing to see here, folks. But seriously, have you noticed it's not just a conspiracy theory anymore? No, these people aren't hiding it. It's happening in broad daylight, and you, the average citizen, are the last to know. While you're worrying about your grocery bill or the cost of gas, a group of unelected elites, most of whom you've never heard of and couldn't pick out of a lineup, are quietly plotting to centralize power, control economies, rewrite your freedoms, and basically take over the world like some Bond villain in a three-piece suit. Think I'm exaggerating? Let's review. You've got the World Economic Forum, that charming little club where billionaires and politicians gather every year in a Swiss resort town to lecture you about why you should stop eating meat and maybe live in a pod for the sake of the planet. Meanwhile, they fly on private jets, enjoy steak dinners, and shake hands on deals that enrich themselves at your expense. It's all for the greater good, they say. Right. Then there's the UN, an organization that's so far removed from your daily life, you probably only hear about it when they're proposing some utopian global tax scheme, or worse, handing out awards to dictators who fought for human rights. It's the classic bait and switch. They promise peace, but what they really want is control over your life, your money, and your sovereignty. But here's the best part. They're telling us that we, the ordinary citizens, are the problem. Our very existence is what's wrong with the world. Too much driving, too much eating, too much living. The message is clear. If we could just reduce our carbon footprint and shut up, they could save the world. Well, let me tell you something. No thanks. We're going to expose the truth about this coordinated effort to dismantle the freedoms that make Texas and America great, because believe me, they're coming for it. And here's the kicker. They're doing it in plain sight. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the globalist agenda and what it means for you, your family, and the future of this country. Helping us to do that is retired Colonel Larry Kaifesh, a 28-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And joining us now for his first appearance on Texas Talkin is retired Colonel Larry Kaifesh. Larry, welcome to Texas Talkin. Thanks for coming on.
Shilo, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's an important conversation, one that I feel must be had. I want to start, Larry, by asking you this, because I feel like if I were to poll 10 different people from off the street and ask them, what is a globalist? I'd probably get 10 different answers. So for the sake of definitions, what is a globalist?
The easiest way to define a globalist is a person that wants a one world government. Now, you can't have a one world government if you have countries that don't want to get on board. And if you have a country like the United States of America that has a constitution that says our rights come from God, our creator, it's going to be a problem. So what you see happening before us today, this attack on America is all designed to destroy America by overwhelming the systems in order for it to collapse so that they can reintroduce and say, looks like democracy didn't work or a constitutional republic didn't work, and now we're going to have a one world government. So the globalists are those, and it's being driven by the banks of international settlement and the central banks. And then, of course, you've got the World Economic Forum and the Trilateral Commission, these think tanks that push the policies down into the United States, into the governments that are forcing these policies out. It's very big. It's very complicated. It's been going on for a very long time. I would say legitimately here in the United States for about 50 years.
So you talk about in presentations that I've watched a center of gravity, and I'm wondering if you could tell us contextually with warfare, drawing upon your experience as a U.S. Marine, what is a center of gravity?
So the center of gravity, when you're in war, you need to look at the enemy and you need to know everything about them. And you need to be able to do an analysis and identify what is it that gives them their strength, and what, if taken away, will ensure their demise. That is their center of gravity. And that is what we must target if we want to be victorious in this battle. Now, the globalists have been extremely well at doing one thing, and that's controlling the narrative. If you control the narrative, you control the world. And fortunately, or sadly, they've been doing that. So I use the story of my friend Patrick Wood. I wrote a book that he wrote in the 1970s about the Trilateral Commissions, which are globalists. They're a group of that was trying to create a one world government with the World Economic Forum, with the Rockefeller Foundation. And when I talked to him, I said, how could this take place? How could you be writing about this since the 1970s and nobody's ever talked about it? He goes, they've been suppressing it. They've been squashing it. They've been controlling the narrative. And this was a phenomenal book written in the 1970s about the threat we are today. So they've been able to monopolize us and the narrative, because when they started in the 70s in a legitimate force, there was only ABC, CBS, and NBC. Today, obviously, there's more outlets, but there's still 6 major corporations that control 90%.
And of those, to that point, Larry, of those 6 major corporations, I find it astonishing that if you take a deep look, you're going to find that 3 companies, 3 private equity firms essentially own everything: BlackRock, State Street Capital, and Vanguard. And
Correct.
those 3 own shares in each other.
That's right. And they're part of the think tanks. They're part of the policy influencers pushing this down through corporate media, through corporate headquarters, by pushing DEI, et cetera. That is exactly right. Now, what's happened in the last 10, 20 years is we've started to have a crack. There is now information getting out that's not being controlled, and it's being done by great podcasters like yourself. It's being done by social media outlets. It's being done by people going out speaking to the group, but the truth is getting out. 90% is still programmed and controlled. 10% is not, and that is what they fear. And that's why you see such this commitment to destroy free speech. Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris both talked about it. We can't let these people talk about it. They're saying it's misinformation, but it's truth.
Yes.
And as you've heard me say before, if you really want to get to the truth, you have to talk to people that have been canceled, attacked, or censored.
Amen, brother.
And you've
Amen.
been all the above.
Yes, I have
as well. Okay. That's what's happening.
That plays. Go ahead.
The center of gravity is the enemies, the globalist monopoly on controlling the information. They cannot survive the truth. And that is why it's so important that you're doing what you're doing and others are out there spreading the word, because most folks won't get it if they're sitting on their TV watching corporate news or cable news. It's going to be propaganda, misinformation, and there will be truths in there, but it's packaged in a way to support their agenda.
And this is what you have taught me is 5th generation warfare, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So real quickly, if you go through the history of warfare, 1st generation warfare was warfare without gunpowder, bullets, and guns. Okay. 2nd generation warfare was with gunpowder, bullets, and guns. Think about the Revolutionary War. 3rd generation warfare is when we had tanks and planes and trench warfare like we saw in World War I. Then 4th generation warfare is when we introduced weapons of mass destruction: nuclear, biological, chemical, and cyber. Okay. 5th generation warfare is the war we are in right now. And this is something that's existed from the beginning of time, but we didn't have the technology to support it. But 5th generation is a war for the minds. They want to be able to control us. And they're doing it right now by pushing lies, misinformation, propaganda, and psyops. They can control our behavior. And that is what it's all about. They want to control us through information and ideas they're pushing to us. And look what's happening. I mean, we see it right now. We've got people that are supporting Kamala Harris because why? Because she promotes joy.
Yes, okay. That's the word that they keep parroting.
Exactly. That is propaganda, but that is how they succeed. So yeah, 5th generation warfare is the most dangerous. We are in the middle of it right now. COVID-19 was a perfect example. Look at the psychological operations they forced on the American people and the global population with COVID-19, the vaccine, the jab, the pandemic, all for naught. In fact, the World Economic Forum just came out about a week ago and said that It was really just an exercise to see how far we could get people to go.
I said that almost from day one when this whole thing started. I said it to whoever would listen. This is a test, and we're failing it as a society. They don't only want to control us; they tend to also control our politicians. And what I want to ask you is, how does this globalist cabal tend to exert its influence and control over our elected officials?
Well, I mentioned before there was a former member of Congress from Texas. I won't mention the name. Years ago, talked to me. And he says, "Larry, we all come up here to do the right thing." Talking about Capitol Hill. I was working in DC at the time. He goes, "But within a very short amount of time, we start making decisions we would have never thought about before we got here." And Catherine Austin Fitts, for those that don't know her, please look her up on Rumble. She's talked about it at length, and we've seen other examples. But basically, as soon as a person gets to a certain level of power and influence in America and across the globe, most of them get controlled. Okay, take a
How do
look
they
at
do
some.
that?
Well, the easiest way, there's multiple ways, but the easiest way is to get them in a compromised position where you can blackmail them. Another
Get them
way is
doing
to
something they're not supposed to be doing.
correct. And I'll repeat the story of Madison Cawthorn because it's a perfect example. But Madison Cawthorn was a congressman from North Carolina. He was a young man, 26 years old. He's in a wheelchair. He came out while he was on the Hill and he said, "You're not going to believe what happened to me yesterday." What happened? Well, I was invited to a party. At this party, there were a lot of drugs, there were a lot of sex, and you're not going to believe who was there. Talking about the most powerful people in Washington, D.C. at this event. The next day, Kevin McCarthy came out and said, "This kid doesn't know what he's talking about. He was just being crazy. He's silly." They didn't waste any time to get a candidate to run against him and run him out of office. And he was a very good conservative, was doing a lot of good things, and they ran him out. But that is how they do it. Once they get you caught in Western civilization, if you are caught with an underage person, they can control you. If you're doing an act that you shouldn't be doing, they can control you. If you look at what Epstein was doing, if you look what P. Diddy was doing, it was all about getting people of influence and power under control, get them into a compromising position where you have them on tape and you can use that. By doing so, these globalists, they don't need to be elected. They can control, they can take these people and say, "You're going to do what I say or you're going to get exposed." So it's the best of both worlds. They don't have to put themselves on there, but they're getting exactly what they want done. And that's why we in America don't feel we're being represented in the House or in the Senate. I
Because
think
we're not.
Yeah, because we're not. They are now, I mean, most representatives, not all, are compromised and controlled. And that's why they do things that don't make sense. Look at Dan Crenshaw.
Yes.
He was good for about 6 months.
Yep.
And then they got to him. Okay.
Totally different now.
Oh,
you couldn't tell the difference between him and George W. Bush at this point ideologically in my estimation.
I don't think you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we win, especially here in Texas? What can we do to combat this concerted, orchestrated effort to control every facet of our lives?
This is a huge battle. Think about it. This has been going on for decades. They've been able to make significant progress. The beautiful thing is we know what the center of gravity is. We know that they cannot survive the truth. So it is imperative for us to get the truth out. That's really priority number one. If we can get the truth out and expose them on COVID-19, expose them on the stolen elections in 2020, expose them on the assassination attempts on our president, okay, President Trump, then we can start to make significant progress. But in the meantime, when we're electing somebody, we have to really, really focus on people of principle, people that can't be bought, people that will not get into a compromised position, people that are going to do what they say and say what they do and be willing to fight. We need war fighters right now in order to be able to defeat this because the pressure is on. I will say, Dr. Brett Weinstein, he made a great comment the other day. He goes, we're fighting against a great threat. They're some of the smartest people in the world. They're at the top of finance, politics, corporations, media, entertainment, education. Not everybody, but the rungs are, the positions of the people in power. And but they may have overstepped their boundaries. And we've exposed them to a degree where it's building up every day. Every day we're discovering more truths. More and more people are recognizing nobody trusts our federal government anymore. Most people
Yes.
don't believe our federal agencies are working for us, but they're weaponized against people who love God, family, country, and the Constitution. And we get examples every day. That's starting to pick up progress. But anyway, Dr. Weinstein says, you know what? We got a huge battle before us, but I like our odds. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. It's not going to be easy, but if we can continue doing what you're doing, sharing truths, getting people out there informed, getting people away from corporate media and understanding that they're all compromised. And if you really want to get to the truth, go to people that have been canceled, censored, or attacked. Go to rumble.com.
Yep.
Go to your podcast.
Thank you.
Alex Jones has been talking about this for 20 years.
And he's right more often than he's wrong. And they call him a lunatic, because they don't want people listening to him.
And that's what they're going to do. And that's when you know you're listening to somebody of credibility. When they say you're crazy and everything you're saying is false, you know you're on target. Look what they're saying about the Haitians in Ohio. There are
There's
dozens.
video evidence.
Yeah, exactly. There's credible evidence.
We see it with our own eyes.
Right. And they're saying, oh, that's not happening. It's misinformation. We got to censor that. But that's when you know you're getting to the truth. Rumble.com does a great job at getting it out.
Yes.
Understand Google is going to push false information. Corporate media is going to push false information. And anybody that's not canceled, censored, or attacked is not necessarily going to be the best source to listen to.
I couldn't agree with you more. Do you feel like these globalists, Larry, are getting even more brazen? It's almost like they don't try to hide it anymore. They're doing it all in plain sight. And I don't know if it's because of complacency or to your point earlier about COVID and the vaccine mandates being a test of our resolve. Do they just believe that we'll go along with anything at this point?
Well, I think there's two things happening. One, they realize they're in a position of power. Let's face it, they own the White House.
Yeah.
They have leadership in almost every department and agency of our federal government. They were able to steal an election in 2020. They were able to get 60 to 70% of the population to take a jab that's not safe or effective. Okay. They do have a lot of power. They do have a lot of influence. And at this point, they're a little bit, and this is what the beautiful thing about these people are, they always overreach. In so doing, though, they're exposing themselves even more. Now, they are a little bit, what would you call them, overconfident, but they also recognize there's a vulnerability. And Yuval Noah Harari, the lead advisor to Klaus Schwab, who started the World Economic Forum, really said, he goes, if President Trump gets reelected, our globalist ambitions are over.
Good.
If there wasn't any reason to support Trump, that's one. I mean,
That's
there's
it.
millions, but that is absolutely. So they recognize they need this election more than ever. And that's why they're going to get desperate. At the end of the day, I think we both realize this is it.
Yes.
They're either going to have the Great Reset or we're going to have the Great Awakening. And we're coming to loggerheads. So they're being bold. We're being bold. We need to overwhelm them with truth and commitment to God, family, country, and the Constitution.
So we strongly believe in taking action on this show because, frankly, talk is cheap. So I want to ask you, what would you suggest as the top 3 action items or tasks, if you will, that our viewers can do?
Yeah. First thing, you got to seek the truth. Go after it, seek the truth. Second thing you have to do is share the truth. We all know people in our lives. And obviously, many are going to be brainwashed for years, so they're going to be very hard to connect with. Try to, in a very compassionate way, say, hey, I really think this is important. Take a look at it. Because a lot of times they want us divided and fighting each other.
Yes.
That's what they want. That makes us weak. Divided, we will fall. United, we will come and be victorious. So we need to figure out a way. And it's going to be different for every person because you have different relationships with different people. But for those that are still lost, try to reach out to those and share with them some basic truths. We've got to get this down. So it sounds simple. There's no magic bullet. It really is. We've got to wake up the American people. They want the Great Reset. We need the Great Awakening. So we need to share the information, share the truth. Everybody needs to learn the truth. And I would recommend, I mean, I got tons of great sources, but Catherine Austin Fitts, you know, you can listen to her. You can listen to the speech that I gave on the Globalists. There's great books out there, the Trilaterals over Commission. There's multiple books on the Great Reset. Glenn Beck has one. Alex Jones has one. So if you don't know what the Great Reset is, it's smart and important for us all to get to know and understand it. Because if we don't know the enemy and we don't know what they're doing, we can't defeat them. So really, information is number one. The truth will set us free. We need to get the truth out there. So that's what I would say foremost. Secondly, talk to those that you are having problems with, but people you know that you love and you trust, and in a compassionate way, try to get them informed as well. And then lastly, I mean, I wish I could tell you this is what we do, but it really is a great awakening.
Yes.
The enemy has been able to make such great progress because they were doing it under the radar. Nobody knew it was happening. And after 50 years, people are waking up. Like I said, I discovered this 3.5 years ago after 28 years in the Marine Corps with a top secret SCI clearance. I didn't know till after I retired and got fired for providing informed consent on the jab.
Tell our viewers that story, because I think this is so important to the development of where you're at today and frankly, the microphone that you are for truth.
Well, thank you, Shilo. Yeah, I mean, long story. You know, I thought I had a pretty good understanding of what was going on in the world. I was a news junkie. I read a lot. I went to the War College, got a master's degree in national security and strategic studies, 28 years in the Marine Corps, 7 tours in the combat zone. It wasn't until I came home, went to Chicago public schools to help educate the children in Chicago, the disadvantaged children, at a military academy. And it was there that the CEO, Pedro Martinez, who was fired from Texas because he was pushing mandated jabs and masks on his students and staff, gets hired by Chicago public schools. And he gives everybody in the district the day off to get vaccinated and boosted. I had been working with Peter McCullough, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. I knew the jabs were not safe, the jabs were not effective, and they were causing irreparable harm, and especially for young kids who had no issue with it. So I sent an email to the parents and to the cadets, and I said, please look at the government data you can find on OpenVAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, with your doctor before getting vaccinated or boosted. And that's what you call informed consent. Informed consent is a legal requirement. You must share with the person the benefit and the risk of any drug, especially, or vaccine, especially a experimental vaccine. So I was providing them the concerns, and I was suspended and fired. And that's when I started studying. I said, what's going on here? There's something more going on. And that is when I discovered what was happening. There is a coup d'etat. It's a financial coup d'etat being pushed by the globalists. I think that's the most appropriate term. These folks that want a one world government and that have saturated our own government. And they're on the brink of being successful. Project 2030. I mean, that's their goal. Their goal is to have this done by 2030. We're at a loggerhead. Thank God President Trump got elected. If President Trump didn't get elected,
we'd already be there.
We may have never known.
Yes.
But President Trump exposed them. And that's why they went into overdrive and become so blatant in their nefarious activities, because they realized we've got to win. Otherwise, it's game over.
Exactly. Larry, you write a brilliant column regularly. Where can our viewers go if they want to check that out, or even perhaps learn more about you?
Yeah, the best place to go right now is my Substack account. Go to Substack at Larry Kaifesh. I go by the Constitutional Colonel, and I try to put out important pieces at least a couple times a week. I do write for Texas Scorecard periodically. I just got an article published.
Publication.
Yeah, I just got an article published in American Thinker. I've had several there, but most recently my recent one was pushed there. So, but Constitutional Colonel or Larry Kaifesh on Substack is the best way to reach me. Larry Kaifesh, Kaifesh.
We'll put it up on the screen for you. Now, awesome. I don't say this to very many people, but I'm going to say it to you because I mean it with all sincerity. You're a hero, Larry. Thank you.
Wow. Shilo, God bless you. I love what you're doing, and keep it up.
You as well, and may God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great state of Texas. Stay dialed in to interviews and content just like this by clicking that follow button on my Facebook page, or hit the subscribe button to learn more about exclusive access that you won't want to miss.